The house was quiet, too quiet. As the front door clicked shut, Elliott Granger froze for a moment, a sense of unease creeping up his spine. He had come home early from an important meeting, hoping for a quiet evening with his fiancée. But something felt wrong. He heard the soft shuffling of footsteps down the hallway, followed by a faint, panicked voice. "Stop, don't." His heart skipped a beat. Without thinking, he dropped his briefcase and hurried down the corridor. The voices grew louder, the tone more desperate. At the end of the hallway, he saw his fiancée, Isabella, with her back turned to him. But what caught his attention more than anything was the small figure standing before her. His daughter, Emily, no older than 7, was pushed violently against the wall, her face twisted in fear. The moment seemed to freeze. Time stood still as the room held its breath. Isabella, unaware of his presence, was still holding onto Emily's arm, her grip firm. Emily winced, her small body shaking, her eyes wide with terror. Elliott's breath caught in his throat. "What is going on here?" His voice was low but carried a weight of authority. Isabella spun around, her eyes wide with surprise. "Elliott, you startled me." She quickly released Emily's arm, her tone smooth, as if nothing had happened. "It's nothing, just a little misunderstanding." But Elliott's eyes were fixed on his daughter, who was now rubbing her arm, trying to hold back tears. He could see the faint red marks where Isabella's fingers had gripped too tightly. The tension in the room was palpable. Emily's gaze flickered from her father to Isabella, then back again. Elliott's heart clenched. He knelt down to his daughter's level, his face softening as he placed a hand on her shoulder. "Emily, are you okay?" She nodded quickly, but the fear in her eyes was undeniable. The same fear that had haunted him for weeks, the feeling that something was wrong but he couldn't put his finger on it. Isabella tried to step in, but Elliott held up his hand, silencing her. "What happened?" he asked again, his voice firmer now. Isabella smiled nervously, stepping between him and Emily. "She's just being dramatic, Elliott. You know how children are." Elliott didn't respond. He wasn't convinced. Emily's trembling hand gripped his, and for the first time in a long time, he felt a wave of guilt wash over him. He had been so consumed by his work that he hadn't noticed the signs, hadn't noticed how Emily was always a little too quiet, a little too withdrawn when Isabella was around. But now, in this moment, everything clicked. He stood up slowly, not breaking eye contact with Isabella. "You're lying," he said, his voice steady but filled with an anger he couldn't suppress. Isabella's smile faltered, her confidence beginning to crack. She stepped back, but Elliott didn't let his gaze leave her. He could feel his heart racing in his chest. Something wasn't right, and he was going to find out what. The truth was about to come to light, and there was no turning back. Irritation flickered in Elliott's eyes as he stood in front of Isabella. He had been home for less than an hour, and already, things were unraveling. His heart pounded in his chest as his thoughts raced. He knew something was off, but hearing Emily's quiet voice, the tremor in her words, had sealed the doubt he hadn't wanted to confront. His daughter was scared, and not just of some imagined drama. There was something happening here, and he needed answers. Isabella, standing just a few feet away, was trying to maintain her composure, her posture stiff and rehearsed. "Elliott, please, don't overreact," she said, her tone smooth, trying to regain control of the situation. "It's nothing. You know how children are. They misunderstand things all the time." But Elliott wasn't listening anymore. He could see the fear in his daughter's eyes, and the growing suspicion gnawing at him. He stepped closer to Emily, placing his hands gently on her shoulders, his voice soft but firm. "Emily, look at me," he said, his gaze intense. Emily slowly lifted her eyes to meet his, her face pale, her small hands wringing together in nervousness. "Is everything okay?" "Did she hurt you?" he asked, his voice steady. Emily hesitated for a moment, then nodded weakly. But there was no mistaking the way she shrank back from Isabella. It was as if she feared that even the slightest movement would bring more trouble. Elliott's heart clenched at the sight, and something inside him snapped. "I know you're scared, sweetheart. It's okay," he said softly, pulling her into a gentle hug. The warmth of his embrace seemed to settle her a bit, but the fear didn't leave her eyes. Isabella stood still, watching the scene unfold in front of her. Her hands folded neatly in front of her. Elliott could feel her tension rising, the way she was trying to maintain control. But it wasn't working anymore. He could see it the way she was avoiding his gaze, the way she kept shifting her weight from one foot to the other. He wasn't buying her story anymore. "Isabella," he said, his voice low but commanding. "What's going on? Why is she so scared?" Isabella's eyes flickered for a moment, and for a brief second, Elliott thought he saw a flash of guilt, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. "Elliott, I told you. She's just being dramatic. You know how children are at this age. They want attention. That's all." But her words fell flat. Elliott wasn't buying it anymore. Not after what he had just seen. The way Isabella had grabbed Emily's arm so roughly, the way Emily had winced at her touch, it was all too much. There was something deeper here. Something Isabella wasn't telling him. He took a step back, holding Emily's hand firmly in his. "I don't believe you," he said quietly, his voice hardening. "I need to know the truth." Isabella's expression faltered for a moment, and Elliott's eyes narrowed. He could see her beginning to crumble under the pressure, but she quickly recovered, forcing a smile as she stepped closer. "Elliott, you're overreacting. You're letting your emotions get the best of you. It's nothing. Please, just calm down." But it wasn't nothing. Elliott could feel it deep in his gut. The unease that had been brewing for weeks now made sense. Emily wasn't just acting out. She was scared of something, someone, and he needed to find out why. "I don't care about what you say. I'm going to find out what's really going on here," Elliott said, his voice unwavering. Isabella took a step back, her eyes narrowing as she glanced between him and Emily. For the first time, a shadow of doubt crossed her face. "You're not going to ruin everything, Elliott." "I won't let you," she said, her voice sharp, but it was too late. Elliott's mind was already made up. This was no longer about some silly misunderstanding. It was about something much more serious. Emily wasn't lying, and he wasn't going to let Isabella hide the truth any longer. The silence in the room was deafening as Elliott stared at Isabella, his mind racing. Emily stood beside him, still clutching his hand tightly, her small fingers trembling. Elliott's thoughts were in turmoil. He had to get to the truth. And he knew that the only way to do that was to confront Isabella directly. He couldn't shake the image of his daughter, scared and vulnerable, shrinking away from the woman who was supposed to be taking care of her. "I'm not leaving here until I get the truth," Elliott said, his voice firm, cutting through the tension in the air. Isabella, however, remained composed, though the faintest hint of discomfort flickered in her eyes. She crossed her arms defensively, a small smirk playing on her lips, as if she were trying to keep control of the situation. "Elliott, I've already told you everything. Emily is just acting out. Children do that. They exaggerate things, create drama. You can't let her manipulate you like this." But Elliott wasn't fooled. He had seen the marks on Emily's arm, the way Isabella had gripped her so tightly. That wasn't something a child would make up. He could feel the anger building in his chest, the urge to protect his daughter taking over. "You're lying," he said, his voice low, but unmistakably filled with authority. Isabella's eyes widened for a fraction of a second before she recovered, forcing a smile. "Why would I lie, Elliott? I love Emily. I've always treated her like my own daughter." Her voice was smooth, but the words didn't have the warmth they once did. There was no sincerity behind them. Then why was she so scared just now? Elliott pressed, stepping closer, his eyes narrowing. Isabella faltered, her composure slipping just enough for him to see a flicker of uncertainty. He could see it now, the cracks in her facade, the way she was trying to maintain control, but it wasn't working anymore. "You're overreacting, Elliott," Isabella repeated, her voice a little shakier now. "I've told you. She's just going through a phase. She's been upset ever since you started spending more time at work. She just needs attention, that's all." "Don't try to twist this, Isabella," Elliott said, his voice rising with frustration. "I've been here for her, but now you're hurting her. I'm not going to stand by and let you do that." Emily's grip on his hand tightened, and Elliott could feel her fear echoing in the palm of his hand. His heart broke for her. He hadn't realized how much this had been weighing on her until now. "Tell me the truth," Elliott demanded, looking directly into Isabella's eyes. There was a long, tense silence. Isabella's expression hardened, but she didn't answer. Instead, she turned away, pacing toward the window. The moment stretched on, each second feeling like an eternity. Elliott felt the anger inside him growing, but he also knew he had to stay calm for Emily. He couldn't let Isabella manipulate him anymore. "If you don't tell me the truth, I'm going to find out another way," Elliott said, his voice cold and steady. Isabella froze at his words, her back still turned to him. He saw her shoulders tense, and for a split second, he thought he might have broken through her defenses. But then she spoke, her voice quieter now, almost a whisper. "You don't understand, Elliott," she said, her tone laced with something dark. "There are things you don't know, things you can't control." Elliott's pulse quickened, and he stepped closer, determined not to back down. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice low and commanding. Isabella slowly turned to face him, her expression now unreadable. She took a deep breath, and for a brief moment, Elliott saw a flicker of fear in her eyes, quickly masked by a cold mask of indifference. "You don't know what I've had to do to keep things together," she said, her voice distant. "You don't know what it's like to be in my position." Elliott's stomach churned, and for the first time, he realized just how much he didn't know about Isabella. He had never suspected she could be capable of anything like this, but now the truth was beginning to unravel. "I don't care what you've had to do," Elliott said firmly. "I care about my daughter, and I'm going to protect her, no matter what it takes." Isabella's eyes flickered with anger, but then, she seemed to deflate, the confidence draining from her face. She looked down at the ground, her shoulders slumped as if all the energy had been drained from her. "You don't understand, Elliott," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want this. I didn't want it to go this far." There was something in her voice now, something that hinted at regret, or was it fear? Elliott wasn't sure, but he knew one thing. The truth was closer than ever, and he wasn't going to let go until it all came to light. The silence between them stretched long, the weight of it growing unbearable. Elliott's eyes never left Isabella, who stood across the room, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. There was a subtle tremor in her hands, betraying the calm facade she tried to maintain. He had pushed her into a corner, and now, he could feel the cracks beginning to show. "I don't care what you think I know, Isabella," Elliott said, his voice steady, though his pulse hammered in his ears. "I need you to tell me the truth, now." For a moment, Isabella said nothing, her eyes flickering toward Emily, who stood silently beside Elliott. The little girl's face was pale, her eyes wide with fear and confusion, but she still stood strong, clutching her father's hand. The image made Elliott's chest tighten. He could see how much his daughter was hurting, and it made him want to do anything to protect her, to make this right. Isabella turned away from them, walking slowly toward the window. She glanced outside, her back to them, as if searching for some kind of escape in the view beyond the glass. "Elliott," she finally said, her voice soft, almost as if she were speaking to herself more than to him. "You don't understand what I've had to do. I've tried. I've tried so hard. But you don't see how hard it is to keep everything together." Her voice wavered, and for a brief moment, Elliott thought he saw a flicker of vulnerability. It was gone too quickly to grasp, but he caught it just enough to know that there was more to the story than she was letting on. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "What do you mean, Isabella? What have you done?" he asked, his voice low but intense. Isabella turned around slowly, her eyes dark with something that felt like regret. "You think everything is perfect, don't you?" she said, her voice almost bitter. "You think I'm this perfect fiancé who comes in and saves the day. But I'm not, Elliott. I've had to fight for everything I've ever had, and I've had to do things I'm not proud of, just to survive." Her words hit him like a cold gust of wind. He had never expected to hear this from her. All the time they'd been together, she had seemed confident, put together, always in control. But now, in the light of this confession, he could see the cracks in her armor. "I didn't want this for Emily," Isabella continued, her voice breaking. "I didn't want to hurt her. I never meant for her to get caught in the middle. But you're always gone, Elliott. And I'm left here, trying to make things work, trying to keep everything from falling apart." Elliott felt a pang of guilt pierce him, but he couldn't let that distract him. "What exactly are you saying, Isabella?" he asked, his voice sharp. What did you do to my daughter? Isabella's gaze flickered to Emily once more, and for the first time, there was a look of something close to shame in her eyes. She stepped forward, but then stopped herself, as if the words she needed to say were stuck in her throat. I didn't want to be the bad guy, she said quietly, but I thought, if I could just push her a little, make her see, maybe she would be like me. Maybe she'd stop being a problem. I thought, if I could just control her, she'd stop being afraid of everything. Elliott's blood ran cold as the truth finally hit him. It wasn't just a momentary lapse. This had been a pattern, something that had been building up for a long time. You've been hurting her, haven't you? Elliott said, his voice steady but seething with rage. Isabella flinched as though his words physically struck her, but she didn't deny them. Instead, she looked down at the floor, her shoulders slumped. I never meant to, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. But I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't stand seeing her so weak. I thought if I could make her stronger, she'd stop being so afraid of everything. Elliott stood frozen for a moment, his mind racing as the full scope of what Isabella had said sunk in. He could barely process it. The woman he had planned to marry, the woman he had trusted to help raise his daughter, had been pushing her, manipulating her, all in the name of some twisted version of strength. And now, Emily was caught in the middle of it. The room felt smaller, suffocating, as he turned his gaze toward his daughter. Emily had been so brave, standing by him through all of this, but he could see how deeply this had affected her. Emily, sweetheart, he said, kneeling down in front of her. He gently cupped her face in his hands. You don't have to be afraid anymore. I'm here, and I'm going to protect you. I'm so sorry I didn't see this sooner. Emily's lip trembled as she nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Elliott felt his heart break for her, but he also felt something else, an overwhelming sense of determination. He was going to get her out of this situation, and he was going to make sure she was never scared again. Isabella's eyes followed him, her expression shifting from one of shame to something else, something cold and calculating. She took a step back, as if preparing for something. But Elliott was done. He was done letting her manipulate him, done letting her control the narrative. I'm done, Isabella, he said, his voice final. This ends now. Irritation flared in Elliott's chest as he turned away from Isabella. The tension in the room had reached a boiling point, and he knew he needed to get out of there. He could feel the weight of Emily's small hand still clinging to his, her fragile fingers wrapped around his own as if holding on for dear life. He didn't want to leave her here any longer. With one last glance at Isabella, who stood motionless, her face drained of color, Elliott nodded toward the door. Come on, Emily. Let's go. He heard Isabella's voice as he moved toward the exit, but he didn't stop. Elliott, please, we can talk about this. Her words were desperate now, tinged with the same fear she had tried to hide earlier, but Elliott had heard enough. He had seen enough. As he stepped outside into the cool evening air, he felt a sense of relief. The pressure in the house, the suffocating atmosphere, seemed to lift just a little. But it didn't make everything okay. Not yet. He turned to look at Emily, who was still holding his hand tightly. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and uncertain, but there was a flicker of something else there too, a silent hope. Daddy, are we leaving? She asked softly. The way she said it, the quiet fear in her voice, made Elliott's heart break. He crouched down in front of her, placing both of his hands on her small shoulders. Yes, sweetheart, we're leaving. I'm not going to let anything happen to you, I promise. She nodded, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. He could tell she was holding herself together, trying to be strong. Elliott wanted to tell her that everything would be okay, that they'd just drive away, and this would all be over. But the truth was, he wasn't sure. As he stood up and pulled Emily into his arms, he heard a sound behind him, the unmistakable sound of a car engine revving to life. He turned his head quickly, and his stomach dropped. Isabella's car was speeding toward them, its headlights cutting through the dark. She wasn't letting this go. She was coming after them. Elliott's grip tightened around Emily as the car pulled up beside them. The window rolled down, and there she was, Isabella, her face now twisted in a mix of anger and something darker. "You can't just walk away from this, Elliott," she shouted. "You don't know what you're doing. This isn't how it works." Elliott's jaw clenched, his temper rising again. "No, Isabella," he said, his voice cold and firm. "You don't get to control this anymore. You don't get to control me or Emily. It's over." The words hit her like a slap, and for a moment, she was silent, staring at him with wide eyes. He could see the anger building in her, the way her fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. But then something changed. The anger faded, replaced by something else, something darker, more calculating. "You think you can just take her from me?" she asked, her voice low and dangerous. "You think I'll let you tear everything apart? You'll regret this, Elliott." He didn't flinch. He didn't let her words shake him. He had to stay strong for Emily. He could see the way Isabella's eyes flickered toward his daughter in the passenger seat, as if calculating her next move. Elliott took a step back, pulling Emily closer to him. "I'm not afraid of you, Isabella. I'm not afraid of your threats. You've already hurt her enough. I won't let you do it anymore." Isabella's lips curled into a twisted smile, but there was no warmth in it. "You'll regret this," she said again, her voice a whisper now, as if she were trying to convince herself. Without another word, she slammed the car into reverse, the tires screeching as she sped off into the night. Elliott stood there, his heart pounding in his chest. He watched her disappear into the darkness, but the dread still lingered. He knew this wasn't over. It was just the beginning. He pulled Emily closer, feeling her tremble in his arms. "We're going to be okay, sweetheart," he whispered, though even he wasn't sure if that was true. "I promise." As they walked toward the car, Elliott's mind raced. The things Isabella had said, the way she had reacted, it all pointed to something darker, something he wasn't ready to face. But no matter what, he was going to protect his daughter. He couldn't go back to the house. Not now. Not ever. The drive ahead of them would be long, and he wasn't sure where they would end up. But he knew one thing for sure. They were leaving that house behind, and they were never going back. The drive was long, but in the silence of the car, Elliott didn't mind. Emily sat quietly beside him, her small hands folded neatly in her lap. She had been so brave, so quiet since they left the house, but he could see the weight of it in her eyes. She had said nothing, but her silence spoke volumes. He kept glancing at her through the rearview mirror, his mind spinning with thoughts. What was he going to do now? He had made the decision to leave, but it wasn't just about getting away. It was about protecting Emily, keeping her safe from whatever Isabella had planned. The words Isabella had spoken haunted him, echoing in his mind. "You'll regret this." The promise of consequences hung in the air, thick and ominous. But for the first time in a long time, Elliott felt like he was doing the right thing. He had to find a way to protect his daughter from the woman who had turned into something unrecognizable. He couldn't go back. Not to that house, not to that life. But where could he go? The city was vast, and even though he had money, the weight of the situation made him feel smaller than he ever had before. Emily's voice broke through his thoughts. "Daddy, where are we going?" Her voice was soft, full of the innocent uncertainty that made Elliott's heart ache. He glanced at her quickly, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "We're going to a safe place, sweetheart," he said, trying to sound reassuring. "A place where we can start fresh." She nodded slowly, but her brow furrowed with concern. "Isabella won't hurt us anymore, will she?" Her question cut through him like a knife. He swallowed hard, unsure how to answer. He had no idea what Isabella would do next, and the uncertainty of it all made his stomach churn. "No, Emily," he finally said, his voice tight but filled with determination. "She won't hurt us. I'll make sure of it." Emily didn't respond. She just stared out the window, the quiet hum of the car the only sound between them. Elliott could see her reflection in the glass, her little face still holding the traces of fear. He hated that he couldn't make it better, that he couldn't just erase the fear from her eyes. But he was doing everything he could to keep her safe, to make sure that no one could hurt her again. He drove for what felt like hours, the city passing by in a blur. He didn't have a specific destination in mind. All he knew was that he couldn't go back to that house, couldn't go back to the place where everything had gone wrong. He needed space, and most importantly, he needed time to figure out what to do next. Eventually, the city gave way to the outskirts, and the streetlights grew sparse, replaced by stretches of dark road and open fields. Elliott's hands tightened on the steering wheel, the strain of the day settling in his muscles. He pulled off onto a quiet road and found a small motel, its neon sign flickering in the distance. He didn't want to stay there for long, but it would be a safe place for the night. As the car rolled to a stop in front of the motel, Elliott turned to Emily, who was still staring out the window. "We're here," he said softly. "Let's go inside and get some rest. Tomorrow, we'll figure out the next step." Emily nodded, though she still seemed distant. As he got out of the car and walked around to her side, he opened the door and held out his hand. She took it hesitantly, her small fingers wrapping around his. Together, they walked inside, and Elliott signed them into a room for the night. The room was small but clean, and he tried his best to make it feel like home for her, for them. He made sure Emily was comfortable on the bed, tucking the blankets around her with a soft kiss to her forehead. She was still quiet, but the tension in her body had relaxed just a little. Elliott sat on the edge of the bed, watching her for a few moments before standing and walking to the window. He could see the lights of the distant city beyond, but all he could think about was the road ahead. There were too many unknowns, too many questions, but one thing was certain: he would protect Emily no matter what. He couldn't let Isabella win. He couldn't let her tear them apart. The weight of that thought settled heavily on his shoulders, but as he turned back to look at Emily, he felt a flicker of hope. She was safe. For now, and that was all that mattered. The next morning, Elliott woke up to the quiet hum of the motel. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, casting a soft, golden light through the small window. He hadn't slept much the night before. His mind had been racing, thinking about what came next. He glanced over at Emily, who was still curled up under the blankets, her small body rising and falling with each gentle breath. He didn't want to wake her yet. She had been through so much, and he knew how tired she must be. But they couldn't stay here forever. As much as he wanted to give her a sense of normalcy, they needed to find a more permanent solution, a place where they could start over. Elliott sat up on the edge of the bed, rubbing his face with both hands, trying to clear the fog in his mind. He had no idea where to go from here. He didn't have a clear plan, and the thought of confronting Isabella again made his stomach churn. The woman had already threatened him, and he had no doubt that she would do whatever it took to keep control. He had seen a side of her that he never imagined existed. He had underestimated her, but not anymore. She would stop at nothing to get what she wanted. Elliott looked over at Emily again. She was still asleep, her small face peaceful, unaware of the weight of the world that rested on her shoulders. The thought of putting her in danger again made his blood boil. He had to protect her, and that meant doing whatever was necessary. He couldn't let Isabella win. He couldn't let her manipulate him anymore. But as much as he hated to admit it, he needed help. Elliott had never been the type to ask for help. He had built his own empire from nothing, relying only on himself to get things done. But this was different. He couldn't do this alone. He needed to find someone who could help him take control of the situation. He needed someone who could stand with him, someone who could help him keep Isabella at bay. He grabbed his phone from the bedside table and scrolled through his contacts. He hesitated, his finger hovering over the name. He had worked with him before, and although they weren't exactly friends, he trusted him. His name was Marcus, a lawyer who specialized in family matters. They had crossed paths a few times, and Marcus had always been reliable. Elliott didn't have the luxury of time. He pressed the call button and held the phone to his ear. The line rang 3 times before Marcus picked up. "Elliott," Marcus said, his voice gruff but professional. "What's going on?" Elliott's throat tightened as he tried to find the right words. "I need your help," he said, his voice low and urgent. "It's about Isabella. She's been hurting Emily, and I don't know what to do." There was a brief pause on the other end, and Elliott could almost hear Marcus processing the information. "You're serious?" Marcus asked, his voice sharper now. "I don't joke about this kind of thing," Elliott replied. "She's been manipulating her, pushing her, and I can't let her do it anymore. I need to get Emily out of there, but I don't know where to turn." Marcus sighed. "All right, we'll figure this out. Meet me in my office in an hour. I'll start making some calls. Get the legal ball rolling. You're going to need protection, and we'll make sure you have it." Elliott's heart started to race with a sense of relief. Finally, he had a plan. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "I don't know what else to do, but I'm not going to let her hurt Emily anymore." "We'll get it sorted," Marcus replied. "But you need to stay calm. You've got to think about what's best for Emily. That's the most important thing right now." Elliott nodded, even though Marcus couldn't see him. "I know," he said. "I will." He hung up the phone and stared out the window. For the first time in days, a small weight lifted off his shoulders. He wasn't alone in this anymore. With Marcus's help, he could fight back. He could finally take control of the situation. But as much as he felt a sense of relief, there was still a gnawing fear in the back of his mind. Isabella wasn't going to give up easily. And now, knowing that he was actively fighting her, he knew she'd be even more dangerous. He looked over at Emily, who was starting to stir in her sleep, and his heart softened. He had to protect her, no matter the cost. He stood up, walking quietly to the bathroom to wash his face and prepare for the next steps. He had no idea what this journey would entail, but he knew one thing. He wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not ever. An hour later, Elliott was sitting across from Marcus in his office, the cold, sterile walls of the law firm offering no comfort. The weight of the situation was settling in, and his mind raced with thoughts of Emily, wondering what she was doing back at the motel, still too young to understand the full extent of what was happening. The door to Marcus's office clicked shut behind him, and he felt an uneasy tension settle into his chest. He had always been someone who prided himself on solving problems on his own, but now, with Emily's future hanging in the balance, he knew he couldn't do this alone. Marcus was already at his desk, going through some papers as he prepared for their meeting. He looked up when Elliott sat down, his gaze direct and calculating. "All right, Elliott, we need to talk strategy. You can't just run from this. We need to make sure we have all the legal bases covered if you want to protect Emily and yourself," Marcus said, his voice firm but calm. Elliott nodded, his jaw tight with frustration. "I know. I don't know how it all got this bad. I thought I could trust her. I thought I was doing the right thing by giving her a chance. But now," he trailed off, his thoughts swirling. Marcus leaned forward slightly, folding his hands together. "You trusted the wrong person, and now you need to protect the one person who matters the most, your daughter." Elliott swallowed hard, the lump in his throat growing as he thought about Emily, still so innocent, caught in the middle of everything. "I don't care what happens to me," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "I just need her to be safe. I can't let her go back to that house. I can't let Isabella hurt her anymore." Marcus nodded, his expression softening with understanding. "That's the right mindset, Elliott. And you're not alone in this. We'll figure it out. First, we'll make sure Isabella can't get near Emily. That's step 1. Step 2 will be getting everything on paper, all the evidence you have, and preparing for what comes next." Elliott's mind was still racing, the uncertainty of it all overwhelming. What if she won't let Emily go? What if she fights me? What do I do then? Marcus's gaze was steady, unwavering. "If she fights you, we fight back. Legally, of course. We'll get temporary custody of Emily and put a restraining order on Isabella. We'll file for full custody, and I'll help you every step of the way. But you need to be prepared for a fight. Isabella won't just let this go, not without trying to turn the tables." The words hit Elliott hard. He knew Marcus was right. Isabella had already shown her true colors. She wasn't going to let go without a fight, and he had to be ready for whatever she threw his way. But he was more determined than ever. He wasn't going to let her tear apart his family. "I can't let her win," Elliott said, his voice stronger now, filled with resolve. "Not after everything she's done. Not after what she did to Emily." Marcus's eyes narrowed, and he gave a slow nod. "I know, and you won't have to. We'll get her the protection she needs, and we'll make sure she's safe. But you need to stay calm. Don't let Isabella get under your skin. Don't give her that power." Elliott felt a surge of anger. "I'm done letting her control me. I'm done letting her control Emily. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure she's safe." Marcus stood up from his desk, walking over to a file cabinet and pulling out some paperwork. He laid it on the desk in front of Elliott. "Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to file for a temporary restraining order today. We'll need to get statements. Any evidence you have that shows she's been abusive toward Emily. We'll also need to get a custody hearing set up. I'll make some calls to speed up the process, but this is going to take time. You need to be patient." Elliott nodded, his mind starting to focus. He wasn't going to waste any more time. He wasn't going to let Emily's life be controlled by someone like Isabella. He glanced at the papers in front of him, the weight of them symbolizing the battle ahead. "I'm ready," he said, determination in his voice. "I'll do whatever it takes." Marcus smiled, a slight but approving nod. "I knew you would be. Just remember, this isn't going to be easy, but we'll get there, one step at a time. Step 2 will be getting everything on paper, all the evidence you have, and preparing for what comes next." Elliott's mind was still racing, the uncertainty of it all overwhelming. What if she won't let Emily go? What if she fights me? What do I do then? Marcus's gaze was steady, unwavering. "If she fights you, we fight back. Legally, of course. We'll get temporary custody of Emily and put a restraining order on Isabella. We'll file for full custody, and I'll help you every step of the way." His stomach churned with nervous anticipation. He had been here before, years ago, but never in a situation like this. His fingers drummed nervously on the steering wheel as his thoughts raced. What would Isabella do next? What kind of fight was he about to face? He glanced over at Emily, who was sitting quietly in the passenger seat. She had been so brave, so resilient, but he could see the fear in her eyes, the uncertainty. She had never experienced anything like this. "Daddy, are we really going to court?" Emily's soft voice cut through his thoughts. He turned to her, offering a reassuring smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yes, sweetheart. We're going to make sure everything is okay. You don't have to worry. I'm here with you." She nodded, her small fingers twisting the edge of her shirt. "I'm scared, Daddy." The words broke his heart, but he had to stay strong for her. "I know, sweetie, I know. But remember, we're doing this because it's what's best for you. You're safe now, and we're going to make sure it stays that way." He reached over, taking her hand in his, squeezing it gently. He wasn't sure if his words were comforting her, but he had to try. He had to make her believe that everything would be okay, even if he wasn't entirely sure himself. He had already been through so much. Now, with the custody hearing looming, everything was at stake. The door of the courthouse loomed ahead of him, and he felt the weight of it settle over him. He had to walk through those doors and face Isabella, who would stop at nothing to keep control. He knew she would fight him every step of the way, using every legal loophole she could find. The truth was, he didn't know what she was capable of. "Daddy, will Isabella be here?" Emily asked, breaking the silence again. "Yes," he replied, his voice steady despite the anxiety rising in his chest. "She'll be here, but we're not going to let her hurt you anymore." Emily squeezed his hand in return, the only sign of the strength she had left. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound being the soft hum of the car's engine. Elliott could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him. As much as he wanted to protect Emily from all of this, he knew that there was no way around it. He had to fight for her. They both deserved a better life, free from fear, free from the control Isabella had tried to exert over them. Taking a deep breath, Elliott opened the car door and stepped out, helping Emily out beside him. They walked slowly toward the courthouse, the building towering above them as they approached. The air felt thick, heavy, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for the confrontation that was about to take place. Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere was cold and impersonal. They passed through security, and Elliott felt his nerves tighten. He hadn't expected the nerves to hit him this hard. He had always been able to handle stressful situations in the past. But this was different. This was his daughter's future on the line. They made their way to the waiting area, where a few other families were scattered, waiting for their own hearings. Emily clung to him, her small body trembling slightly. "I don't want to go in there, Daddy," she whispered. "I know, baby, but we have to. It's the only way to make sure that Isabella can't hurt you anymore." Emily nodded, her lip quivering as she tried to hold back tears. Elliott knelt down beside her, brushing her hair back gently. "You're so strong, you know that? You're doing such a good job. And I'm so proud of you." Emily gave him a small, shaky smile, and for the first time that day, he saw a flicker of the girl he had known before all of this started, the strong, resilient little girl who had been forced to grow up too soon. The door to the courtroom opened, and a tall, stern-looking officer motioned for them to enter. Elliott stood up, his hand still holding Emily's tightly. He walked through the door and into the courtroom, his heart pounding in his chest. As he walked in, his eyes immediately found Isabella. She was sitting on the other side of the room, her posture rigid, her face an impassive mask. But Elliott could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her jaw clenched as if she were preparing for a battle. And this was going to be a battle. He had no doubt about that. The judge was already seated, looking over a few papers. As Elliott and Emily took their seats, he felt the eyes of everyone in the room on them. He could feel Isabella's gaze like a weight on his back, and he knew that this would be the moment where everything would be decided. There was no going back now. The hearing was about to begin, and Elliott was ready to fight for his daughter. He wasn't going to let Isabella win. Not this time. Not ever. The room fell silent as the judge called the court to order. Elliott felt the weight of the moment settle heavily on his chest, but he refused to let it overwhelm him. He had fought for this day, for this chance to take back control of his daughter's life. As he glanced over at Emily, sitting quietly beside him, he could see the fear in her eyes, but also a glimmer of hope, a hope that they were finally doing the right thing. Isabella was across the room, her expression a mix of defiance and calm. She sat perfectly still, her eyes locked on Elliott as if she were daring him to make the first move. Her lawyer, a slick man in a dark suit, sat next to her, scanning over documents as if they had all the answers. Elliott clenched his fists under the table, fighting to keep his emotions in check. He couldn't let Isabella see how much she rattled him. He had to stay strong. The judge looked over the papers in front of him, his brow furrowed in concentration. After a moment, he addressed the room. "We are here today to discuss the custody of Emily Granger. Both parties will present their cases, and I will make a decision based on what is in the best interest of the child." The words echoed in Elliott's ears. This was it. The moment that would decide Emily's future. He took a deep breath and stood up when his name was called. He felt every eye in the room on him, but he didn't look away. His gaze stayed locked on the judge as he stepped forward. "Your Honor," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "I am here today because I need to protect my daughter. Isabella has hurt her, emotionally and mentally, in ways I never thought possible. I thought I could trust her, but the truth is, she's manipulated and controlled Emily for far too long. I'm not asking for full custody out of anger or vengeance. I'm asking for it because it's what's best for Emily. She needs to feel safe. She needs to feel loved, and I am the one who can give her that." He paused, his throat tightening as he glanced at Emily, whose eyes were wide, filled with confusion and fear. "She's my responsibility. I will do whatever it takes to make sure she's okay." He sat down, the words hanging in the air like a heavy weight. The judge nodded, scribbling notes on his pad. The room was still, the tension palpable. Isabella's lawyer stood next, his voice smooth and practiced as he began to speak. "Your Honor, while Mr. Granger's concerns are valid, we must consider the full context here. Isabella has been a mother figure to Emily since she was a child. She has provided for Emily, and has always been there for her. Yes, they've had their disagreements, but that doesn't mean Isabella is unfit. The accusations made by Mr. Granger are based on assumptions, and there is no hard evidence to support them. We ask that you consider the fact that Isabella has been a stable, nurturing presence in Emily's life." The words felt like a punch to Elliott's stomach. He wanted to stand up and yell, to shout that it was all lies, that Isabella had never been nurturing, that she had twisted everything to suit her needs. But he couldn't do that. Not here. Not now. He had to stay calm, for Emily. The judge looked up from his notes, his eyes scanning the room before turning to the lawyer. "I understand your argument, Mr. Wright, but we will need more than just words. If these accusations are to be taken seriously, we need evidence. We will take a brief recess while both parties prepare their supporting materials." A murmur rippled through the room, and the judge dismissed everyone for a short break. As the room emptied, Elliott stood up and walked over to Emily, who was still sitting quietly, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. He knelt down beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Hey, you okay?" he asked softly. Emily nodded, but her lips trembled. "I'm scared, Daddy," she whispered. "I don't want to go back there." Elliott's heart broke for her. He wanted to tell her that everything would be okay, that they'd leave this room with everything they needed. But the truth was, he didn't know. He didn't know what the judge would decide, and the thought of losing her was more than he could bear. "I know, sweetie," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "but I promise you, I will do everything I can to make sure you never have to go back there. We're going to get through this, together." He hugged her tightly, feeling the weight of the moment settle into his bones. He had no idea how long this fight would last, but one thing was certain: he wasn't going to back down. Not now, not ever. The break was over too quickly. The moment of calm had passed, and Elliott could feel the weight of the courtroom pressing down on him again. He could hear the murmur of voices as everyone returned to their seats, the sound of footsteps echoing on the cold floor. As he took his place next to Emily, who was still clinging to his side, he couldn't help but glance at Isabella. She was sitting perfectly still, her face a mask of controlled indifference. But he knew better. He could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands gripped the armrest, the slight twitch of her jaw. She was nervous, and that was a good sign. He wasn't going to let her manipulate him anymore. He wasn't going to let her control Emily. The judge called the court to order again, his voice sharp and commanding. "We're ready to proceed," he said. The room fell silent, and Elliott's heart pounded in his chest. This was it, the final moments that would determine Emily's future. The judge turned his attention to the lawyer representing Isabella. "Mr. Wright, you may present your evidence," he said. The lawyer stood up, adjusting his suit as he prepared to speak. He had a cool confidence, but Elliott could see the nervousness in his eyes. He wasn't as sure of his case as he was letting on. Mr. Wright turned to the judge and presented a series of papers, documents that Elliott knew were meant to support Isabella's claim that she had been a good mother figure to Emily. But Elliott wasn't worried. He knew that Isabella's facade would crumble under scrutiny. "We're going to get through this, together." He hugged her tightly, feeling the weight of the moment settle into his bones. He had no idea how long this fight would last, but one thing was certain: he wasn't going to back down. Not now, not ever. The break was over too quickly. The moment of calm had passed, and Elliott could feel the weight of the courtroom pressing down on him again. "We believe Emily is better off staying with Isabella, who has shown nothing but devotion to her." The words were smooth, rehearsed, but there was something off about them. They didn't hold the weight that they once might have. Elliott felt a surge of anger rise up in him, but he forced it down. He had to stay calm. He had to think of Emily. He glanced at her again, her wide eyes filled with fear and uncertainty. He could see the doubt creeping into her mind, but he couldn't let her see his own. The judge nodded thoughtfully as Mr. Wright finished his presentation. "Thank you, Mr. Wright," the judge said, turning his attention to Elliott. "Mr. Granger, do you have evidence to support your claims?" Elliott stood up, his heart racing. He had prepared for this moment, but now that it was here, he wasn't sure if he was ready. He glanced at Emily, who was watching him closely, her small hand clutching his. He took a deep breath and began to speak. "Your Honor," he said, his voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside him. "I have nothing to gain by making these accusations. I'm here because I want to protect my daughter. I want her to be safe. I want her to grow up in an environment where she doesn't have to live in fear." He paused, his eyes locking with the judge's. "Isabella has hurt Emily in ways that I can't ignore. She's emotionally manipulated her. She's controlled her. She's made her feel small, insignificant, like she doesn't matter. I have proof of that, Your Honor." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out the folder of evidence that Marcus had helped him compile. He placed it carefully on the table, sliding it toward the judge. The judge picked up the folder and began flipping through the documents. "What is this?" he asked, raising an eyebrow as he skimmed the pages. "This is a record of the times Emily has been hurt," Elliott said, his voice firm but calm. "It includes messages from Isabella, things she said to Emily. It includes the testimony from a therapist who spoke to Emily about the emotional abuse she's suffered. It includes photos of the bruises she's gotten when Isabella's temper got the best of her." The room fell silent as the judge flipped through the documents. Elliott could feel the tension building. This was it. This was the moment that could turn everything in his favor. The judge finally looked up, his expression unreadable. "This is serious, Mr. Granger," he said. "I will review this evidence carefully before making a decision, but I need to be certain that the best interest of the child is being considered here." This isn't just about your relationship with Isabella. This is about what's best for Emily. Elliott nodded, trying to keep his voice steady. I know, Your Honor, and I'm asking for you to consider what's best for her. I'm asking for her to be with me, where she will be safe and loved. I will do whatever it takes to make sure she has a happy life. The judge nodded and leaned back in his chair, taking a moment to absorb everything that had been said. The room was quiet, everyone waiting for the decision that would shape Emily's future. It felt like hours, though it was only minutes. Finally, the judge spoke again. I will make my ruling after I have reviewed the evidence. This court will reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Please be here promptly. The gavel came down with a sharp crack, and the hearing was over for the day. As the room began to empty, Elliott felt a mix of emotions: relief that it was over for now, but dread for what was to come. He turned to Emily, taking her hand in his once more. We'll get through this, he whispered to her, though he wasn't sure if he was trying to convince her, or himself. The morning of the next day came faster than Elliott had anticipated. The hours between the hearing's end and now seemed to stretch on endlessly, each minute filled with an anxious anticipation. He woke up early, not wanting to waste a single moment. He knew the court session was just around the corner, and the weight of everything that had happened, everything that was still to come, hung heavy on his shoulders. Emily, however, slept peacefully, her small form curled up under the blankets. He had promised her they would get through this, but the truth was, he had no idea what today would bring. Would the judge rule in their favor? Would he finally be able to protect her from Isabella? Or would this be just another fight they had to endure? Elliott ran his hands through his hair, feeling the weight of uncertainty press in on him. There was a fire inside him, determination, a fierce drive to keep his daughter safe, but there was also a nagging fear. What if it wasn't enough? What if the system didn't work in their favor? He pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the moment, on the steps he had already taken to ensure Emily's safety. He had prepared for this day, gathered the evidence, and put his trust in Marcus. He had done everything in his power, and now, he just had to wait. After a quick shower, Elliott quietly made his way to the small kitchen area of the motel room. He didn't want to wake Emily yet, knowing she needed the rest. As he brewed some coffee, his thoughts were once again drawn to the evidence, the photos, the testimony, the reports, everything they had gathered over the past few days. It had been exhausting, but he had made sure everything was in order. He was as prepared as he could be. A soft knock at the door broke him from his thoughts. It was Marcus, standing in the doorway with a grim expression. How's she doing? Marcus asked, stepping inside when Elliott motioned him in. She's sleeping, Elliott replied, glancing over at the bed where Emily lay, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. I'm doing okay, I guess, just trying to keep it together. Marcus nodded, his face somber. I know it's tough, but we're getting close to the end. Today's the day we find out if we have the upper hand. Elliott tried to smile, but it felt forced. I just don't know what to expect, Marcus. Isabella, she's not going to back down. She never has. Marcus sat down at the small table, looking directly at Elliott. You've got everything you need to prove your case. You have the facts, and you have your heart in the right place. That's what counts. But you need to keep your cool today. It's not about winning or losing in the courtroom. It's about Emily. It's about making sure she's safe. Elliott nodded, taking a deep breath. I know. I just can't shake the feeling that she's going to keep fighting us. I can't let Emily go back to that house. I can't let Isabella hurt her again. Marcus gave him a firm look, his tone serious. You're doing the right thing, and we're doing this together. We'll be there for Emily, every step of the way. Just then, Emily stirred in the bed, her eyes fluttering open. She rubbed her eyes sleepily and looked at Elliott. Daddy? She whispered, her voice small and fragile. Is today the day? Elliott's heart swelled with emotion as he walked over to her side. He sat down beside her, brushing her hair from her face gently. Yes, sweetie, he said softly. Today's the day. But remember, no matter what happens, I'm here with you. We'll get through this together. Emily looked up at him with wide eyes, the uncertainty in her expression clear. She didn't understand everything that was happening, but she understood enough to know that it was important. Will I be okay? She asked, her voice trembling. Elliott smiled, fighting back the lump in his throat. Yes, sweetheart, you will. You're strong, and I'm going to make sure you're safe. You'll never have to go back to the way things were. She nodded slowly, but her eyes still held a flicker of doubt. Elliott squeezed her hand, his resolve strengthening. They had made it this far, and he wasn't about to stop now. Let's get ready, he said, standing up and offering her his hand. We have a long day ahead of us. As they prepared to leave the motel room, Elliott felt the familiar weight of the day ahead. But this time, he wasn't alone. With Marcus at his side, and Emily with him every step of the way, he had the strength to face whatever came. The walk to the car felt like an eternity, the silence between them heavy with anticipation. As he opened the car door for Emily, she climbed in quietly, her small face pale, but determined. Elliott followed, taking one last look at the motel before pulling out into the street. It wasn't just about a courtroom victory anymore. It was about protecting the future he would build with Emily, free from the fear that had haunted them for far too long. As they drove toward the courthouse, Elliott focused on the road ahead. Whatever came next, he knew he was ready. The truth would come out, and he would make sure Emily's voice was heard. No matter what it took, he would win. For her. The courtroom was eerily quiet as the judge read over his notes, his eyes scanning the documents in front of him. Elliott sat at the edge of his seat, his heart pounding with each passing second. Emily sat beside him, her small hand clenched tightly in his, her face a picture of fear and hope all at once. It felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting for the decision that would determine their future. The judge finally looked up, his expression unreadable. He took a deep breath before speaking. After reviewing the evidence presented by both parties and considering the testimony provided, I have come to a decision. Elliott's breath hitched, his chest tightening with anticipation. The silence seemed to stretch on forever before the judge continued. In the matter of the custody of Emily Granger, the court has determined that temporary custody will be awarded to Mr. Granger. A full evaluation will be conducted before a permanent decision is made. The words hit Elliott like a wave of relief, but it was only temporary. This was just the first step. But it was a victory, no matter how small. He looked over at Emily, who was staring at him with wide eyes, confusion and fear written on her face. He squeezed her hand gently, trying to convey everything with just that one gesture. "It's okay, sweetheart," he whispered. "We're going to be okay." Emily looked up at him, her eyes searching his face, trying to understand. Slowly, a small, tentative smile spread across her face. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was a glimmer of peace in her eyes. Isabella's lawyer stood up, speaking quickly, but his words were drowned out by the buzzing in Elliott's ears. He wasn't paying attention anymore. All that mattered was Emily. All that mattered was that they were going to be okay. Isabella remained seated, her expression frozen, her face pale. She had expected this. She had known this was coming, but hearing it from the judge made it real, and Elliott could see the anger rising in her. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor as she made her way out of the courtroom. She didn't look at Elliott or Emily as she passed, but Elliott knew that this was far from over. He had won this round, but Isabella wouldn't give up so easily. He had to stay vigilant. As the court session concluded, Elliott stood up, pulling Emily close to him as they made their way toward the door. His legs felt like they might give way beneath him, but he didn't care. He had done it. He had kept his promise to Emily. They walked out of the courthouse into the bright sunlight, the weight of the past few weeks slowly beginning to lift off his shoulders. The air felt fresh. The world suddenly opened to them in a way it hadn't been before. Emily looked up at him, her small face full of curiosity. "Daddy, is everything really okay now?" she asked, her voice still tinged with uncertainty. Elliott bent down, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Yes, sweetie. Everything is going to be just fine." He couldn't promise that there wouldn't be more challenges ahead, but he knew one thing for sure. He was going to be there for Emily. He was going to fight for her, no matter what. And as long as they had each other, nothing else mattered. As they walked to the car, Elliott's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw that it was a message from Marcus. He opened it quickly, reading the short but reassuring words. "We'll make sure Isabella doesn't get near Emily. This is just the beginning, but you're on the right path." A small sigh of relief escaped his lips. He wasn't alone in this fight anymore. They weren't alone. As they drove away from the courthouse, Elliott glanced at Emily, who was now resting her head against the window, her eyes closed. She looked peaceful, for the first time in a long time. He smiled softly, his heart swelling with love and pride. They had come so far, and there was still a long road ahead of them, but they would face it together. He wasn't going to let anything tear them apart. For the first time in what felt like forever, Elliott allowed himself to believe that everything might just be okay. And as he drove down the road, the horizon stretched out before them, full of possibilities. They had a new beginning now, and he was going to make sure they were going to be okay. In this gripping black story, Elliott fights to protect his daughter Emily from a controlling and manipulative figure, Isabella. As the court battle unfolds, emotions run high, and Elliott is faced with the difficult challenge of proving that Isabella's behavior has been emotionally damaging to Emily. The story takes the audience through tense courtroom moments, raw emotions, and a father's relentless determination to ensure his daughter's safety. The twists and turns in this black story reveal the complex relationship between father and daughter, showcasing the power of love and resilience. As the story progresses, Elliott's journey to protect Emily becomes a battle not just in the courtroom but in his own heart, as he must find the strength to face the woman who has caused so much harm to the child he loves. With the future uncertain, this black story is a powerful reminder of the importance of standing up for what is right, no matter the obstacles. As the judge makes his decision, the tension reaches its peak, but the ending leaves hope for a fresh start. This black story highlights the emotional journey of a father and daughter, showing the transformative power of love and determination. Through these struggles, the story emphasizes that no matter the hardships, a family's bond can overcome any obstacle, especially when faced with the strength of a father's love for his child. Get ready to experience a heart-pounding black story filled with suspense, emotion, and a father's unwavering resolve.